Imagine surviving a bullet to the face. Now imagine surviving it twice. Imagine losing your left eye and simply pulling it out yourself because the doctor is too slow. Imagine being shot in the skull, the ankle, the leg, the hip, and the ear and continuing to fight. Imagine tearing off your own fingers with your teeth when a doctor refuses to amputate them. Imagine surviving 2 plane crashes, 5 car accidents, and tunneling out of a prisoner of war camp at age 61. Now, imagine doing all of this, and when asked about World War I, the most devastating conflict humanity had ever seen, casually remarking, "Frankly, I had enjoyed the war." This is not fiction. This is not exaggeration. This is the true story of Lieutenant General Sir Adrian Carton de Wiart, the most unkillable man in military history. A soldier who fought in 3 wars across 4 decades, who was wounded so many times he lost count, who laughed in the face of death so often that death simply gave up trying. He was shot 7 times, bayoneted 3 times, left for dead twice, survived both world wars, and lived to be 83 years old. This is the story of a man who was either the luckiest or the unluckiest soldier who ever lived, depending on how you look at it. January 5th, 1880. Adrian Carton de Wiart is born in Brussels, Belgium, into aristocratic privilege. His father is a wealthy lawyer. His family has connections to Belgian royalty. Young Adrian grows up in luxury, private tutors, grand estates, summer vacations across Europe. But from an early age, Adrian is different. He's not interested in business or law. He's not interested in comfort or safety. He's obsessed with one thing: military glory. He devours books about Napoleon, Wellington, ancient Roman legions. He plays war games in the gardens. He dreams of battles, of leading men, of proving himself in combat. His family is horrified. Aristocratic Belgian boys don't become soldiers, they become lawyers, diplomats, bankers. Adrian doesn't care. At age 10, Adrian's father sends him to England for education, first to a school in Berkshire, then to Balliol College, Oxford. The father hopes English refinement will cure his son's military obsession. It has the opposite effect. Adrian becomes more British than the British. He adopts British mannerisms, British attitudes, British patriotism. And when the Second Boer War erupts in South Africa in 1899, 19-year-old Adrian Carton de Wiart makes a decision that will define his life. He's going to war. There's just one problem. He's a Belgian citizen attending university. He has no military training, no commission, no legal way to join the British Army. So he lies. Adrian drops out of Oxford, changes his name to Trooper Cox, and enlists in the Middlesex Regiment under false identity. He claims to be British. He fakes his age. He forges documents. And somehow, it works. Within weeks, he's on a ship to South Africa. He's 20 years old. He's never fired a gun in combat. He has no idea what he's getting into, and he's about to receive his first wound of many, many to come. The Second Boer War is brutal. British imperial forces are fighting Afrikaner settlers, the Boers who are expert marksmen, masters of guerrilla warfare, and intimate with the harsh South African terrain. The British, expecting an easy victory, are repeatedly ambushed, outmaneuvered, and humiliated. Trooper Cox, Adrian Carton de Wiart, arrives in this chaos in 1899. His first taste of combat is everything he dreamed of, and worse, the crack of Mauser rifles, the whistle of bullets, the screams of wounded men, the confusion, the terror, the exhilaration, and then his first wound. During a skirmish near Kimberley, Adrian is shot in the stomach. The bullet tears through his abdomen, narrowly missing vital organs. He collapses, bleeding heavily. Most soldiers would be evacuated, invalided home, their military career over before it truly began. Adrian Carton de Wiart refuses to leave. After minimal medical treatment, this is 1,900. Surgery is primitive. He returns to his unit. He's walking with difficulty, in constant pain, but he's back in the fight within weeks. And here's where we see the pattern that will define his entire life. Adrian is not just brave. He's not just tough. He's addicted to war. Where other men see horror, he sees purpose. Where others see death, he sees meaning. Combat, for Adrian Carton de Wiart, is not something to survive. It's something to seek out, to embrace, to live for. It's not healthy. It's probably not sane. But it will keep him alive through situations that kill almost everyone else. The Boer War ends in 1902. Adrian has survived his first conflict with one bullet wound and a growing reputation for reckless courage. His true identity has been discovered. He's no longer Trooper Cox, but rather than face punishment for fraudulent enlistment, he's offered a proper commission. The British Army, it turns out, appreciates soldiers who want to fight. Adrian accepts a commission in the 4th Dragoon Guards. He's now an officer. He's legitimate, and just in time, because his next war is about to begin. 1914. Somaliland, East Africa. The British are fighting the Mad Mullah, Muhammad Abdullah Hassan, a Somali religious and nationalist leader resisting British colonial rule. It's a brutal guerrilla campaign in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Scorching deserts, no water, enemy fighters who know every inch of terrain. Captain Adrian Carton de Wiart volunteers for this posting. Of course he does. During a battle near Shimber Barras, Adrian's unit is ambushed. Somali fighters pour rifle fire into the British column from concealed positions. Men fall on all sides. And then Adrian takes a bullet to the face. The bullet strikes his left eye socket, shattering bone, destroying his eye, and exiting through the back of his skull. He collapses, blood pouring from the wound, unconscious. He's carried to a field hospital, essentially a tent, with minimal supplies. The doctor examines him and delivers the verdict. The eye is destroyed, but fragments remain. They need to remove it surgically, but they lack proper anesthetic. The operation will be agonizing. The doctor wants to wait for proper facilities. Adrian Carton de Wiart, barely conscious, bleeding from his face, looks at the doctor and says, "No waiting." And then, according to multiple accounts that Adrian himself confirmed, he reaches up to the ruined eye socket and pulls out his own eye. Just pulls it out. Tears it free, hands it to the stunned doctor. "There," he reportedly says. "Now you can stitch it up properly." This is not a man with a normal relationship to pain, to his body, or to medical prudence. This is a man who views his own flesh as expendable equipment tools, to be repaired or discarded as needed to return to combat. The doctor stitches the wound. Adrian wears an eye patch from then on, giving him the appearance of a Victorian pirate. He's proud of it. He thinks it makes him look more formidable. He's probably right. Most officers would be invalided home after losing an eye. Perfect excuse for an honorable retirement. Nice pension. Safe desk job. Adrian requests immediate return to active duty. With one eye, impaired depth perception, and a face full of scars, he goes back to fighting in Somaliland. He spends another year in East Africa before the campaign concludes. And then, in August 1914, everything changes. World War I begins, and Adrian Carton de Wiart finally gets the war he's been waiting for his entire life. The Western Front, 1914 to 1918. 4 years of industrial slaughter. Trenches stretching from the English Channel to Switzerland. Machine guns, artillery, poison gas. Millions of men dying for gains measured in yards. It's the most horrific sustained combat in human history. For most soldiers, it's hell on earth. For Adrian Carton de Wiart, it's paradise. November 1914. The First Battle of Ypres. Adrian, now a major, is commanding troops on the front lines. The German army is attempting to break through to the English Channel. The fighting is apocalyptic waves of German infantry attacking British positions, artillery bombardments lasting hours, hand-to-hand combat in mud-filled trenches. Adrian is in the thick of it, not commanding from a safe headquarters, actually in the front trenches, pistol in hand, leading charges. He's wounded again, shot in the hand. 2 fingers are shattered, hanging by strips of skin and tendon. Adrian makes it to a field hospital. The doctor examines his hand and says they'll need to schedule surgery to properly amputate the damaged fingers. It will take a few days to arrange. Adrian Carton de Wiart looks at his hand, looks at the doctor, and says, "I can't wait that long. I need to get back to the line." The doctor refuses to perform immediate amputation. It's not safe. It's not proper procedure. So Adrian, according to his own later account, bites off his own fingers. Yes, you heard that correctly. He tears off his own damaged fingers with his teeth. Just bites them off, spits them out, then asks the doctor to bandage the stumps so he can return to combat. The doctor, traumatized, complies. Adrian is back at the front within days. Over the next 4 years, Adrian Carton de Wiart is wounded repeatedly. Shot in the skull at the Battle of the Somme, 1916. The bullet grazes his skull, leaving a permanent groove, but somehow not penetrating. He's unconscious for hours, wakes up in a hospital, and returns to duty within a week. Shot in the ankle during fighting near Arras, 1917. The bone is shattered. He refuses evacuation, has it wrapped, and continues commanding his battalion while limping. Shot in the leg during the Third Battle of Ypres, 1917. Another bullet, another limp, another return to duty. Shot in the hip during the final German offensive, spring, 1918. This one nearly kills him. The bullet lodges near his spine. He's finally evacuated to England for proper surgery. He's supposed to rest for months. He's back in France within 6 weeks. Shot in the ear, tearing off part of his left ear lobe. He barely notices. By war's end, Adrian Carton de Wiart has been mentioned in dispatches 8 times. He's been awarded the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest military honor, for extraordinary valor during the Battle of the Somme, where he continued commanding his troops despite being wounded, personally led counterattacks, and held a critical position against overwhelming German assault. He's promoted to lieutenant colonel, then colonel. He's a legend among the troops, the one-eyed, one-handed officer who never stops attacking, never shows fear, and apparently cannot be killed. Other officers joke nervously, Carton de Wiart isn't trying to win medals. He's trying to die gloriously and hasn't figured out how yet. The 11th of November, 1918. The armistice is signed. World War I ends. 10 million soldiers dead, 20 million wounded. Europe is shattered, traumatized, desperate for peace. Adrian Carton de Wiart is 48 years old. He's been shot multiple times, lost an eye, lost fingers, has scars covering his body. He's fought in 3 wars across 2 decades. Most men would retire. Most men would be grateful to have survived. Adrian is devastated that the war is over. In his memoirs, he will later write one of the most disturbing sentences any soldier has ever put on paper. Frankly, I had enjoyed the war. Peace is Adrian Carton de Wiart's enemy. The 1,920 seconds and 1,930 seconds, the interwar period, are the most miserable years of his life. He's assigned to various military positions: military attaché to Poland, liaison officer, administrative roles. He hates every minute. He describes peacetime military service as unbearably dull. He throws himself into hunting, fishing, any activity involving danger and adrenaline. He takes up big game hunting in Africa, shooting lions and elephants. It's something, but it's not war. In 1919, Adrian is sent to Poland as part of a British military mission. Poland has just regained independence after World War I and is immediately fighting wars on multiple fronts against Soviet Russia, against Ukraine, against Lithuania. It's chaos. Adrian loves it. He volunteers for combat operations, advising Polish forces during the Polish-Soviet War of 1919 to 1920. He's under fire again. He's in danger again. He's happy again. But the war ends too quickly. Back to administrative duties. Back to boredom. By 1923, Adrian is 43 years old, with a body held together by scar tissue. The British Army suggests strongly that perhaps it's time to retire, accept a comfortable pension, enjoy his remaining years. Adrian reluctantly agrees. He retires to a country estate. He marries a woman named Joan, who somehow tolerates his war obsession. They have 2 daughters. He tries to be a country gentleman. He's absolutely miserable. He farms. He fishes. He writes his memoirs. He corresponds with other veterans. But the adrenaline is gone. The purpose is gone. For 16 years, Adrian Carton de Wiart lives in peaceful retirement, slowly dying of boredom. And then, in September 1939, salvation arrives. Germany invades Poland. World War II begins. And 69-year-old Adrian Carton de Wiart is about to have the time of his life. September 1939. Britain declares war on Germany. The call goes out for experienced officers to return to service. Adrian Carton de Wiart, age 59, shows up at the War Office the next day. "I'd like to volunteer for active service," he says. The recruitment officer looks at this one-eyed, one-handed, scarred, elderly man and presumably thinks he's joking. He's not joking. The British Army, desperate for experienced officers, accepts him. They assign him to command the Central Norway Expeditionary Force, a British and French operation to assist Norway against German invasion in April 1940. It's a disaster. The operation is poorly planned, under-equipped, and quickly overwhelmed by superior German forces. But Adrian, now a major general, throws himself into combat with the same enthusiasm he had in 1914. He's 60 years old, leading troops through Norwegian snow under German air attack, coordinating defensive positions. He's finally alive again. The Norway campaign fails. Allied forces evacuate in May 1940. Adrian is among the last to leave, organizing the rearguard defense. 1941. Adrian is assigned as British military liaison to Yugoslavia. His job: coordinate with Yugoslav forces resisting German invasion, provide support, maintain communication with London. He arrives in Belgrade in April 1941, just as the Germans launch their invasion. The Yugoslav army collapses within days. The government flees. Adrian finds himself in a country falling apart around him. Time to leave. Time to evacuate. Time to escape to safety. Adrian decides to stay as long as possible, trying to organize resistance. Eventually, British authorities order him to evacuate. On the 10th of April 1941, Adrian boards a British bomber aircraft for the flight to Cairo. The plane also carries several other evacuees and valuable intelligence documents. The aircraft takes off, climbs to altitude, and then engine failure. The plane crashes into the Mediterranean Sea near Libya. The impact is catastrophic. The aircraft breaks apart. Several passengers are killed instantly. Adrian, 61 years old, one-eyed, one-handed, is thrown into the sea. He can't swim well. The missing hand doesn't help. The water is cold. Wreckage is sinking around him. He should drown. He doesn't. He grabs floating debris, stays afloat, and somehow survives until an Italian naval vessel spots the wreckage and picks up survivors. Adrian Carton de Wiart has just survived his first plane crash. The Italians pull him from the water and realize they've captured a British general. He's now a prisoner of war. April 1941 to September 1943. Adrian Carton de Wiart spends over 2 years as an Italian prisoner of war, first in a camp in Italy, then transferred to a castle in Tuscany reserved for high-ranking officers. The Italians treat him relatively well under the Geneva Convention. Officers receive decent food, comfortable quarters, and respect. He could sit out the rest of the war in reasonable comfort. Adrian immediately begins planning escape. August 1941. Adrian and several other British officers dig a tunnel from their barracks, working at night, hiding the excavated dirt. It takes months. They finally break through outside the camp perimeter. Adrian, 61 years old, missing an eye and hand, crawls through the tunnel, emerges outside the wire, and makes a run for it. He's recaptured within days. The Italian guards are amazed. "You're a general. You're 61. Why are you tunneling through dirt like a common soldier?" Adrian shrugs. "What else am I supposed to do? Sit around?" The Italians transfer him to Castello di Vincigliata, a medieval castle in the hills near Florence. It's beautiful, comfortable, and theoretically escape-proof. High walls, guards, middle of Italian countryside. Adrian starts planning immediately. April 1943. He discovers a weak point in the castle wall, old stonework that can be loosened. He spends weeks carefully removing stones, creating a gap just barely wide enough to squeeze through. One night, he slips through the gap and disappears into the Tuscan countryside. For 8 days, a 63-year-old, one-eyed, one-handed British general evades Italian search parties, moving through farmland, begging food from sympathetic locals, trying to reach Allied lines. It's an incredible feat of endurance, but Italy is under full German and Italian control. There's nowhere to go. He's recaptured. Again. The Italian guards are now deeply frustrated. "General, please. You are too old for this. You will hurt yourself." Adrian just smiles. "I'll keep trying until I succeed or die. Your choice. Which happens first?" September 1943. Everything changes. Italy surrenders to the Allies and switches sides in the war. The German army occupies Italy to prevent Allied advance. POW camps fall into chaos. In this confusion, Adrian Carton de Wiart is transferred to British control and evacuated to Allied territory in southern Italy. After 2.5 years as a POW, he's free. He's 63 years old. He's been shot 7 times, bayoneted 3 times, survived a plane crash, and multiple escape attempts. Most people would go home, rest, accept retirement with honor. Adrian volunteers for another assignment. 1943 to 1946. Winston Churchill personally selects Adrian Carton de Wiart for a critical diplomatic mission. Serve as British representative to Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek in China, coordinating Allied strategy in the China-Burma-India theater. It's not a combat role. It's diplomacy, strategy, high-level negotiation. Adrian hates diplomacy, but Churchill asks personally, and you don't say no to Churchill. So, at age 63, Adrian travels to China, one of the most challenging postings imaginable. The journey alone is dangerous. March 1944. Flying from India to China, Adrian's aircraft encounters severe weather over the Himalayas, the most dangerous air route in the world, known as the Hump. The plane is caught in violent turbulence. Equipment fails. The pilots lose control. The aircraft crashes in the mountains. Once again, Adrian Carton de Wiart walks away from a plane crash. Bruised, battered, but alive. He's 64 years old. This is his second plane crash. He survives both. At this point, death must be personally embarrassed. Adrian spends the next 2 years in China, working with Chiang Kai-shek, coordinating Chinese and allied military operations, dealing with the complex politics of Chinese internal factions. It's frustrating work. Less shooting, more meetings. But he performs admirably. He's respected by the Chinese, trusted by Churchill, and effective at his job despite having no diplomatic training and openly hating diplomacy. August 1945. Japan surrenders. World War II ends. Adrian Carton de Wiart is 65 years old. He's fought in 3 wars: Boer War, World War I, World War II, across 4.5 decades. He's been wounded more times than he can count. He's survived bullets, bayonets, plane crashes, POW camps, and general old age. Surely, now he'll retire. 1947. Adrian Carton de Wiart finally, truly retires. He's 67 years old. He returns to England, receives honors and awards, and settles into a country estate. He writes his memoirs, published as Happy Odyssey in 1950. The title is revealing. Despite everything, despite all the wounds and horrors, he considers his life happy. He has no regrets. He would do it all again. The book is full of dry British understatement that barely conceals his enthusiasm for combat. On losing his eye, it was not too inconvenient. On having his hand amputated, I was able to return to duty quickly. On being shot repeatedly, I was fortunate in my wounds. On World War I, frankly, I had enjoyed the war. Modern psychologists reading Adrian's memoir recognize something troubling. He almost certainly suffered from what we'd now call combat addiction. He didn't just tolerate violence, he craved it. Peace made him depressed. Danger made him happy. This isn't healthy. It's not normal. But in Adrian's case, this pathology kept him alive. His absolute fearlessness, his refusal to accept defeat, his willingness to endure any hardship these traits would kill most people, they saved him. Adrian spends his final decades peacefully. He fishes. He hunts. He corresponds with old military friends. He watches the world change around him. World War II gave way to Cold War, British Empire dissolving, new conflicts emerging. He's offered opportunities to comment on modern military affairs. He declines. He's not interested in modern warfare. Technology has made it too impersonal. Where's the glory in pushing buttons? Even in retirement, danger finds him. Over the years, he's involved in 5 car accidents, none his fault, all involving other drivers. Each time, he walks away with minor injuries. At this point, it's almost comical. The man survives 3 wars, 7 bullet wounds, 3 bayonet attacks, 2 plane crashes, multiple escape attempts, and peacetime traffic is trying to finish the job. It fails. The 5th of June, 1963. Adrian Carton de Wiart dies peacefully in his sleep at his home in Ireland. He's 83 years old. One of the 53. 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 He dies of natural causes. Not bullets, not explosions, not plane crashes. Natural causes. Death finally claimed him, but only when he was ready to go. So what do we make of Adrian Carton de Wiart? He was, by any measure, one of the most extraordinary soldiers in history. His combat record is unmatched, wounded over a dozen times, survived 2 plane crashes, escaped POW camps twice, fought in 3 wars across 45 years, received the Victoria Cross and numerous other decorations. But he was also, by modern standards, probably suffering from serious psychological issues. His enjoyment of war, his addiction to danger, his seeming indifference to his own survival. These aren't healthy traits. Yet we must understand Adrian in context. He was born in 1880, in an era when military glory was the highest masculine ideal. He came of age reading about Victorian military heroes, the British Empire at its height, when war was seen as noble, heroic, purifying. World War I shattered that illusion for most people. But not for Adrian. He experienced the same horror, the same industrial slaughter, the same nightmare that traumatized an entire generation, and somehow, his mind processed it differently. Where others saw meaningless death, he saw purpose. Where others saw horror, he saw meaning. It's not that he was brave. Bravery implies overcoming fear. Adrian didn't seem to have fear. He had something else, something stranger. Is Adrian Carton de Wiart a hero? That depends on your definition. He was incredibly courageous, that's undeniable. He led from the front, never asked his men to do anything he wouldn't do himself, and inspired tremendous loyalty. He was also reckless, endangering himself unnecessarily, refusing medical care, seeking out danger when prudence dictated retreat. He was effective. His tactical abilities, his leadership, his refusal to surrender all, contributed to Allied victories. He was also lucky, astonishingly, impossibly lucky. Bullets that should have killed him merely wounded him. Crashes that killed others spared him. Luck isn't a military skill, but in Adrian's case, it was his most valuable asset. Today, military psychologists would probably diagnose Adrian with combat addiction, possibly PTSD expressing as danger-seeking behavior, maybe even a death wish that paradoxically kept him alive through sheer refusal to die on anyone's terms but his own. Modern militaries would never allow someone like Adrian to serve too reckless, too old, too damaged. Today's warfare is professional, technical, careful. There's no room for one-eyed, one-handed generals pulling out their own shrapnel and returning to combat. And maybe that's progress. Maybe modern understanding of trauma, mental health, and the cost of war is better than the Victorian stiff upper lip mentality that Adrian embodied. But there's also something admirable, something almost mythical about a man who looked at death repeatedly and just refused. Adrian Carton de Wiart belonged to a different age. He was the last of the Victorian warrior class, a man who believed in glory, duty, and courage above all else. The world moved on, but he never did. He fought in the last wars, where individual courage mattered, where a single officer could change a battle through sheer force of will. He survived long enough to see warfare become mechanized, industrialized, impersonal. He was a relic, an anachronism, a man who should have died a dozen times but somehow lived to see his 83rd birthday. Today, Adrian Carton de Wiart is buried in a quiet churchyard in County Cork, Ireland. His gravestone is simple, understated, just his name, rank, and dates. No mention of the Victoria Cross. No mention of his wounds. No mention of being the most unkillable man in military history. He wouldn't have wanted fanfare. He would have preferred to be remembered as a soldier who did his duty. But we remember him as more than that. We remember him as living proof that sometimes the human spirit's refusal to quit is stronger than any bullet, any explosion, any force trying to kill it. Shot 7 times, bayoneted 3 times, left for dead twice, lost an eye, lost fingers, survived 2 plane crashes, escaped from POW camps, fought in 3 wars, lived to 83. Adrian Carton de Wiart, the man who refused to die. In his memoirs, Adrian Carton de Wiart wrote, "Looking back, I wouldn't have missed it for anything. War is a grand experience, and the longer you survive, the more fascinating it becomes." He meant every word.